A low entropy carrier is the role of government. Creativity in the image of our creator is the role of the entrepreneur in the economy.
Today's guest is George Gilder, renowned author, visionary economist, and one of the most influential futurists of our time. He's a former speechwriter for President Ronald Reagan, and he's long stood at the crossroad of economic policy and technological innovation. His groundbreaking books, including Wealth and Poverty, Microcosm, and Life After Google, have shaped public discourse on capitalism, information theory, and the digital future. Yet beyond his intellectual legacy, George Gilder is also a committed Christian whose deep moral convictions permeate his work. He offers a rare voice that weaves together rigorous economic thought, both technological foresight, and profound faith in God's order and design. With that introduction, George, let me just start out with one introductory question. Do you believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ?
I do.
You do? And how long have you embraced that?
I think it's an expression of faith, and I embraced it through my mother and through my upbringing and my membership in churches all my life. My mother used to take me to different churches all over New York, different Christian churches, and so I was brought up in an environment where the belief in the physical resurrection of Jesus was present in my life, and then it dwindled as I went to Harvard and immersed myself in my career and whatever. It dwindled on the surface, but somehow I believe it grew internally. It became an intrinsic part of my thinking and prayer and aspiration and sense of the universe. And it really, all my work is about, in the beginning was the Word. It wasn't the atom, or it wasn't some physical random collection of molecules, or it was the Word, and that is the central proposition of I think all our lives and technologies and enterprises. It all stems from the Word, which is an expression of creativity, yes. Human creativity in the image of our Creator is sort of the fundamental principle that's guided my life and writing.
Yeah, this whole idea of the Word that you mentioned, sometimes I wonder if the scriptures were written today, if it would even substitute word with information. It's interesting.
I think they're synonyms.
Yeah.
I mean, it evokes something that's transcendent, that is not part of some material configuration. It precedes and animates everything else.
Yes. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Yeah.
And then it says in verse 14 of John chapter 1, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
That's right.
And we saw His glory, glories of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. That Word, that information, who was with God and was God, becomes flesh. Yeah. I mean, this is the beautiful thing that we have in Jesus, that God becomes flesh in solidarity with us, and then teaches us what it's like to have a relationship with this God of the universe.
Yeah.
If you do not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, send me an email, tour@drjamestour.org, and we will get together, and I will share with you about why I embrace the resurrection of Jesus. Tell me, let me change topics. Tell me, what brings you to Houston this week?
I'm investigating. I'm coming to visit you and your laboratories and your companies and your ideas and your prayers but it's Flash Metals USA is the actual company that I'm investigating down here, and it's MTM. They've got a naming problem. They haven't quite figured out their name yet, but I had a wonderful day yesterday exploring the potential of your flash Joule heating process to not only produce graphene as we understand, but graphene, a single two-dimensional layer of carbon atoms with absolutely miraculous capabilities, but also to make what are called rare earth metals, a part of the superabundance of creation. And the newspapers every day, we read about the scarcity of rare earth metals and who's going to monopolize them, and will the Chinese, who now dominate the market of rare earth mining. And you've pointed out that rare earths are super abundant. We have a glut of so-called rare earths. They're actually abundant dirts of various kinds, and they can be harvested from electronic scrap and waste, all those masses of printed circuit boards that we throw out every 3 years and then put on boats to Africa to bury somewhere. They are cornucopias of rare earths that can animate all the future of our electronics and artificial intelligence and two-dimensional carbon in a new carbon epoch.
Yes. Well, let me give the audience just a background on what you're talking about, because this sounds so. As many people who've seen my work know our work in graphene, where one of my students named Dewey Long had developed this idea of flash Joule heating.
Dewey Long is his name.
Dewey Long, yeah, who developed the idea of using flash Joule heating for synthesis. And that's in that company Universal Matter, which is now making over 1 metric ton per day of graphene, and really changing the markets with that. But now we have the same idea where we're using this technology to deal with waste. We had shown previously that we could take plastic waste, for example, which is a real problem in accumulation, tire waste. We could flash it, turn it into graphene. But now what we're showing is we can get metals from waste, because every time you have waste electronics, the metals are still there. So what's happened is you've mined these metals, say in Australia, and then they put the ore, after they pull it out of the ground, they put it on barges. The barges generally go to China. It's processed, and then China extracts the metals from those ores, and then will sell those metals across the world, many of them going into Asia to be made into computer chips. And then those computer chips may come to go back to China for assembly, or for assembly into packages, or they come to the U.S. for assembly. And what's happening now is that we realize that metals are infinitely recyclable. Plastics are not. Once you recycle a plastic, the recycled plastic is never as good as the virgin plastic, and it costs the same amount. And that's why this whole idea of recycling plastic has a problematic past and future, because it's inferior in its properties, and it costs just as much to produce as just virgin plastic. But if we can turn that plastic into graphene, then it has a whole new lifetime. But with metals, the metals go back to the same metals all over again, the same metals all over again. So we've learned that we can take these printed circuit boards that have all these different metals in it that are in much higher concentration than what you find in the ores, much higher. And you didn't have to go all over the world digging in Africa and Australia to find these. They're right here, and now you can flash them, and then we've learned how to separate them as they're coming out. Yeah. So we can separate them, and so the rare earth elements, we're taking waste magnets, are just a gold mine, no pun intended, for rare earth elements.
And gold.
We pull out gold. There's a lot of times there's more gold in a transparent touchscreen than there is of indium.
Yeah.
So you think you have to go after the indium in the indium touchscreen. But no, there's more gold in it, and we get the gold out. We separate the gold, and so we're separating these elements. So what George did yesterday is he went down to visit the company, which is called Flash Metals USA, which is a subsidiary of MTM, Critical Metals. And because what happened is we took this idea of ours, and we took it public under MTM Critical Metals, which has both a presence now on the Australian Stock Exchange and the in U.S. Stock Exchange. So it's on both. And he visited, and he looked at the scale-up equipment, which was the scale-up of what we're doing in our lab. So that's what brought you to Houston, to see the next phase of what can really be done with all these metals recycling. And from battery waste, we do the same thing with the lithium. I mean, I'm going to show you today in the lab how we can take lithium ores and extract lithium very quickly with ores that are abundant in the United States. And all of this now becomes available to us, which gets back to your whole idea that this thing that people worry about, the future, how are we going to deal with this, where are we going to get that? But technology, when you empower technology to occur, it solves these things, right?
Yeah. The creativity is our great gift as human beings, and when we lose faith in our creativity and imitation are derived from divine creativity, we start seeing the world as afflicted with scarcities everywhere and limits, and the only real limit is time, in my view. Time is the limit, and I have a whole theory of that money is essentially tokenized time. It's that time is what remains scarce in a superabundant universe in which we live. And much of government power is to ignore time and subject us all to these constraints and scarcities and restrictions and regulations that actually are the chief cause of scarcity. I mean, like sending all these rare earth metals back to Africa to bury, and shows the kind of perverse policies that rise from a lack of faith in human creativity is the chief faith in the image of our Creator.
Yes, I hearken back to this man named Bezalel in Exodus 31. God says, "I've called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. And I have filled him with the Spirit of God, in wisdom, in understanding, and in knowledge of all types of craftsmanship."
Oh, yeah.
And then it goes on and it says what he could do. He says he could work in gold, in silver, and in bronze. He could work in stone cutting and in stone setting. He could work in wood, fabric, and perfuming, and he had the ability to teach it when you read Exodus 31 and Exodus 36. And this was the man that Moses commissioned to build the tabernacle.
Yeah. And how do you spell him again?
Bezalel. Bezalel.
Bezalel.
Bezalel. Yeah, Bezalel. And in fact, he is the first man in the Bible to ever be described as being filled with the Spirit. He was a craftsman.
Yeah.
And the first man, he says, I have filled him with the Spirit of God. An engineer, a chemist. You know, he could work in all of these different things. And so it becomes obvious then that it is God who fills, God who does this. And I pray often, I say, Lord, make me like Bezalel. Lord, make the students in my group like Bezalel. Give them creativity, because I really believe that there's all these things out there for us to discover, and God is ultimately the one that can open our eyes to this, because it says that the darkness and the light are the same to God. So when it's darkness for us, it's light to Him, and He can reveal this. So it is God. It's ultimately God is the creator, and God can empower and fill. And I think as believers, if we take hold of the Word of God and believe it, believe the Word of God, just take hold of it and say, hey, this is what God has for us. Lord, make me like Bezalel. Lord, do this in my life. Lord, I'm an engineer. Lord, I'm a scientist. Do this in my life, and let me see where other people don't see. You're the one who can reveal these things, and God can just drop in our lap. You know, people talk about the blessings of God when you're generous, how it says in the Gospels. It's going to come pressed down, shaken together, running over in your lap. You won't be able to contain it. And to scientists, to people who love technology, we're not looking for money to pour into our lap. Expose to me these ideas. I mean, that's much more fun than the money. I mean, these ideas to uncover things that nobody before has ever uncovered. And to God, this is easy. And He's like, oh, here you go. Here's another one. Because of you, millions of people have heard the gospel. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that He's risen from the dead, and you will be saved. That's right. That's the requirement. We talk about science concepts which draw people in. Take these nanomachines and have them drill into cells. This would be a great way to kill cancer, right? We also talk about Jesus Christ, who's the best in everything. My faith in Jesus Christ means more to me than anything. If you could continue to give or give for the first time, we would certainly appreciate it. You can go to jesusandscience.org. Thank you so much.
You know, the great British poet Malcolm Guite, his Maundy Thursday sonnet is, love me to light, love me to light. And God somehow converts us to light and illuminates our lives in the future.
So how do you think this contrasts then, this whole idea of creativity and surprise? When we find new things, we go, wow, and we capitalize on it. How do you compare that now to this deterministic AI, which thrives upon all that's been reported already in the internet? Contrast these two bifurcated sort of systems.
Well, AI gives you the average truth, while creativity gives you the surprising new truth. And you can parse the internet data as much as you want, finding patterns which will be useful for searching and researching. But the creativity that actually yields new wealth and new possibilities for human life is surprising. And as Claude Shannon, the father of information theory, showed, information itself is defined as surprise. It's unexpected bits. If everything I say today you already know, or I already know, no information has been supplied. It's the unexpected truths that really represent my glints of revelation, moments of divine messages, and that's really the creativity in the image of our Creator.
Yeah, this whole idea of AI gives you the average, and this was the same thing. I was last summer I was with Stephen Cohen, who was one of the writers of Palantir's software. And he led the whole Palantir effort. And, they capitalize on AI for helping out Department of Defense and large data sets. And I said, tell me, is AI going to become the greatest writer among us? He says, no, it'll become the average. It'll become the average. That AI is the average. Now, you might want to train it on the on all the best writers in the world, and then it'd become the average ability of theirs. But this whole idea of surprise, the things that open up to us, and this whole creativity. How do you think that in this world of AI, how does it? How do we look back and just say, man, humankind has been made in the image of God? Is there some conflict when we see the power of AI?
No, I mean, I think that AI exposes the barrenness of the prevailing materialist philosophy. I mean, all the inventors of the leading AI programs somehow imagine that they are creating God. They really imagine this. They speak of a singularity, as if all intelligence can be summed up in a single model, and it really eclipses the surprises where real intelligence is manifested. We all get scores of letters every day, emails that are written by AI, and they're very smooth, and they're synthetic, and they're perfect, and they're empty, and they clutter our lives with predictable average results that eclipse the light, the surprising light that the divine presence affords.
Yes, yes. This whole idea. I think as believers, we have so much that we can tap into because of the love of God in our lives and His wanting, His desire to bless us. That the Scriptures show us this pattern. If we long for Him, this closeness to Him, there's just so much in His presence, in His goodness that He gives us, and the depth of peace that He gives us. We need not fear the future.
My friend and Bruce Chapman started the Discovery Institute in Seattle.
Yes.
Really, discovery is really the encounters with surprise that transcend the averages of materialism, that the random effects that much of our academy imagines produce ultimately all our technologies, and they really eclipse the crucial inventions, the crucial insights that always are unexpected. They're always surprising, or they wouldn't be significant. If we already know it, it's not inventive. It can't contribute to our at least technological progress.
Right. So as believers, we need not fear AI, quantum computing, biotechnology. There's this idea that this is going to destroy the world. I don't know if you've gotten these letters. I get letters like telling me that I'm the Antichrist. Yeah, they tell me I'm the Antichrist, and my technology is going to bring on the end of the world or something. And so they give me a lot more credit than I deserve. I mean, they really don't understand
the technology. They give the world a lot less credit than it deserves.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And
a pure precarious world that we live on, is providential.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it used to bother me when I got these letters. Now I just delete them very quickly. Sometimes these are from people who don't even want to use the internet, so I get a letter in the mail that tells me this, and I read the first two sentences, and it's in the trash. But let me ask you another question. You recently wrote a book called Life After Capitalism, and you talked about the next material age, that silicon has dominated our world since about 1960 with all these electronic devices. So what's this next material age you're talking about?
Well, I think it's carbon-based. It's the graphene moment, which entailed a new physics. I mean, the prevailing physics really denied the possibility of graphene with all its incredible conductivity, 1,000 times more conductive than copper, 200 times more stronger than steel or aluminum, as flexible as rubber. You know, all this recitation we do of a single two-dimensional layer of carbon atoms in hexagonal patterns, which we call graphene, was denied by the prevailing physics until about the turn of the century. And it was believed that a single layer of graphite, you know, as in the lead in our pencils, would just disintegrate and instead it turns out to be miraculously flexible and fabulous tensile strength and capable of transforming all our technologies. And so a new physics emerged. They got most of it must be junk, but still there have been 40 papers peer-reviewed papers published every day for the last 20 years or so since citing graphene. And it's 5 Nobel Prizes have been awarded. You know, and a new physics is emerging. I call it topology. It sounds topological physics that explains the miraculous properties, the near superconductivity of graphene. It's a great new development and entirely unexpected. I mean, it surprised you, right? This is the man who found it, really.
I didn't find it.
Yeah, but
we just found how to scale it up. But
you're the master of this material, and it surprised you, doesn't it?
Oh, it surprises me all the time.
Yeah.
That we could make it so easily. Just put a high voltage and a high current across a carbon material and graphene forms. You know, it's interesting. God chose to make life out of carbon. We're predominantly built out of carbon. And so it's interesting that in your view, the new age is moving away from silicon and going to this carbon age, which is so he wrote half of your book on Life After Capitalism, talking about this carbon age. Let me mention another one of your books. You wrote a book called Men and Marriage. I know it had a different name previously.
Well, this is about its 5th edition.
Yes.
It keeps coming out
you
in different
first wrote
form.
the first form, it was called what?
Sexual Suicide.
Sexual Suicide. And what year was that?
That was about 1970.
Okay.
Or it came out first in Harper's Magazine, and
that was during the sexual revolution of the 1960s, coming right out of that. Yeah. So a friend of mine mentioned to me just last night, Men and Marriage.
Yeah.
So this morning I got the book and I read about half of it this morning. I'm not done with it, but it's a very interesting book. It was quite insightful. If you're telling me you wrote that in 1970, again, so just so the audience knows, George is a futurist, meaning that he sees trends. It's not like a prophecy direct from God. It is that he sees trends, and based on these trends, he makes predictions of the future. I think it was somewhere around 1980 he had said that television was going to die. Now, in 1980, television is what only people had television, but he predicted that it was going to die, that people were going to be able to have any entertainment they wanted on demand in their home. This is long before the internet. This was 20 years before even the internet. So George is a futurist, and he wrote this book, which is now called Men and Marriage, predicting what was going to happen. And now, as I'm reading it, it's like, it's exactly what happened with society as a result of these things. And you can see that this message that God puts forth in the Bible works. It is real. It is fundamental. And when you go against it, you'd go against it to your peril, because it destroy your life, your family, and your society all around you. And you don't bear children anymore. I mean,
you
just raise little doggies. Yeah,
the materialist superstition are no longer bearing children.
And whole cultures are dying off.
Yeah,
whole cultures. I mean, Japan is going to be no more. South Korea is going to be no more in a few generations. I mean, that's it. And so the U.S. is following suit on this. It's exactly what you were talking about. There was this quote. You were quoting G.K. Chesterton, and where he said, "When people stop believing in God, they don't start believing in nothing. They start believing in anything." Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, they just concoct all these fantasy religions of materialism and sensualism and sexual redemption, and without procreation, without perpetuating the humanity, they embrace these barren and empty and trivial religions of secularism.
So you mean something like men can become women? You mean they might start believing something like that?
I mean, that's an actual belief in the academy, and it's a perfect example of Chesterton's insight. You don't start believing in nothing; you can believe in anything.
Yes. And when you stop believing in God, you start believing in anything.
Yeah.
And so a Supreme Court justice says during her testimony, "I can't tell you what a woman is. I'm not a biologist. I can't tell you." I mean, and you think that this is a Supreme Court justice. So this is, I think, what Chesterton is talking about. You start believing in anything. And I would recommend this. I mean, there's this book, Men and Marriage.
Just for a warning, though, Jim.
Yes.
Men and Marriage got me named Pig of the Year by both the National Organization of Women and Time Magazine. I mean, Pig of the Year, and my family just loved this. And they gave me a model pig, and I went all around the country. I was giving speeches and making appearances, and I've celebrated my role as Pig of the Year, and so I kind of like pigs, and as a result, no more Pigs of the Year were ever named.
You were the last and final
I retired the trophy for Pig of the Year with sexual suicide. Men and Marriage is what it's called now.
Men and Marriage. We make light of it, but let me tell you that when you first start getting criticized by the masses, it hurts a lot. But you get criticized enough, it hurts less each time. That's been my experience. And they call you certain things, and then after a while it rolls off. But that's huge for Time Magazine. And what was the other group?
National Organization of Women.
Wow.
For women.
Calling you Pig of the Year. And this is the types of things, because your thought is based upon the scriptures and your understanding of God. And Jesus told us this would happen. He says, the world is not hating you for your own sake. It hates you because it hates me. It hated me first, Jesus said. And Jesus said, blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely on account of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And so every prophet of God underwent this type of abuse. No prophet was loved by their own community. They may have had a little season, and all of a sudden they come out with another prophecy and they're hated again.
Yeah, but I didn't get abused. I really got. I mean, I've had a wonderful life that I didn't really deserve or earn particularly, but discovering the surprising truths that underlie all our lives is gratifying in itself, and it's liberating, and so I mean it's why something like being named Pig of the Year, it becomes a big tribute, and you turn it into all things joy.
And that's what Jesus said, woe to you if all men speak well of you, for so they spoke of the false prophets. Yeah. So he said, woe to you means be careful. If everyone's speaking well of you, maybe you're not speaking up enough. Maybe there's a problem there. And it says in Hebrews, you've not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. And it seems like shedding blood is the threshold for being persecuted. So sometimes we feel all beat up because somebody said something about my Christian T-shirt. They were offended by it, and it hurt my feelings so bad. And I'm heavily abused, and I'm so persecuted because of this. But the Bible has a threshold, and that threshold is we have to shed blood. And so when you say that you've had a very good life, and I've never shed any blood for my testimony of the faith, people have said things, but I never even hit the threshold of what the Bible considers to be persecution.
Okay. Yep.
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. We haven't been persecuted.
No, we haven't been persecuted. And you say you've had a good life. Let me just mention, I just heard before we started recording that you won a race recently. Tell us about this race that you won.
Well, I didn't win. I came at second.
Second, okay.
In the World 10K Championship in over 85, and it was held in Gainesville, Florida. Okay. The site of University of Florida, but it was the World 10K.
10K for over 85, you came in second.
No, I came in second behind a wonderful Mexican runner who lives at 9,000 feet, Toluca, Mexico. But I was first among all the Americans, and second of all the Americans over 80, which I was. Anyway, I've been running for 70 years, and my biggest triumphs come after 85. It took me till I was 85 to get a silver medal, but it was a world silver medal, so that's excellent. An exciting
that's one way to do it. Wait for all your competition to die off.
Yeah, right. That's really, and then when I finished, I was surrounded by doctors who wanted to find out what kind of VO2 max I had, and how they found there was something wrong with my heart, and there was all kinds of discoveries.
Wow.
But I seem to have made it to Houston for this tour celebration of the possibilities of rare earths becoming abundant, and are abundant, obviously.
Yes, they're abundant. If you wanted to give advice to a young Christian entrepreneur, because your books have been just such a source of inspiration and blessing to people starting companies, going out and starting companies and thinking it's this, I can do it, and let's tackle this thing, and trusting God for creativity. What would you tell young Christian entrepreneurs?
Well, that they have to be oriented to the needs of others. I mean, they shouldn't be seeking their own enrichment. They should be seeking new truths, surprising truths that can enrich the world. I mean, wealth is ultimately knowledge. The Neanderthal in his cave, as Thomas Sowell has said, had all the material resources we have today. The difference between our age and the Stone Age is entirely the growth of knowledge, and an entrepreneur is wealth is his knowledge, and knowledge is achieved through learning, and so if you're learning, you're making progress and gains and creating wealth. The learning itself is the wealth, as learning curves document. And then the scarcity in your life is time, and money is really time, and that's the scarcity. And so I think those are the key lessons, but entrepreneurs are oriented toward the needs of others. They aren't greedy or trying to enrich themselves. To that extent, they probably will fail. It's the entrepreneurs with huge, generous spirits that reach out to the world and that actually achieve great companies and great gains. And wealth is not something they hold, it's what they give to the world.
Mm-hmm. And then tell me, I want you to project out 20 years. Project out 20 years and give us some insight. What is it you see that is good on the horizon, and what is it that you see is a tremendous threat to humankind on the horizon, focusing not next year, but 20 years out?
Well, I think that, the idea that truth is that, physical or technological truth is a singularity. It's one thing that can somehow be monopolized and is in the form of humans creating a new God, is really the great Tower of Babel of our time and the great futility of our time. And intelligence is given bountifully to all of us. And intelligence, as the last century has increased the number of people by tenfold, from 1 billion to 10 billion, 8 billion roughly. And the more people, the more resources. People don't consume resources, people create resources in the image of their creator. Mm-hmm. But they can't create resources if they're subjected to some maze of regulatory power imposed by predatory bureaucrats. The wealth of the world is dependent on a multiplicity of intelligence, and it's not artificial either. It's intrinsic. It's mm-hmm. Our deepest truths come from our transcendence of material and glimpses of the divine.
Yeah.
Surprising glimpses of the divine are the seeds of new wealth. So I think this that what we call artificial intelligence is going to end up being an extent. We now all have supercomputers in our pockets, and they're going to be embodied in a metaverse of new possibilities for the human race, and it's a product of emancipation, of liberation. It's not a product of declaring an emergency and enacting a lot of more rules, or making people wear masks, or all these limits are imposed on us by seekers of power, and rather than seekers of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, George, this has been wonderful. I just want to give a plug for you as a father, because I was mentioning this last night at our dinner, that I think one of the true tests for a man is as their children grow up, as their children become adults, do their children like them? Do they like being with them? And, because if you haven't done a good job, it's hard to go back and make your children like you, because you can't make people like you. And in fact, the one thing that God, one of the things that God commands us to do is He commands us to love Him. So how do you command somebody to love you? That you'd think that that's the thing you can't command. But in God's estimation, when it comes to God, He makes every way possible for us to love Him. Every way possible. But when it comes to our interaction with our children, that a test of a man is, do his grown children love him? And I've seen the interactions that you've had with your children. I was sitting on an airplane, and before you and I ever met, we were going to the same nonconformist meeting, a meeting of nonconformists, and you were sitting behind me on the airplane, and it was like a 2-hour flight. I think it was from Frankfurt to Nice, France. And your daughter was next to you, and I heard the two of you talking this scientific conversation, and you were going back and forth. I mean, it was an intellectually highly muscular interaction, and so I thought this must be a professor and his student, the way this was going back, or a professor and his postdoc going back and forth in conversation. And then when we got off the plane, we got on this in this car together, in this van together, and they're taking us, and we met each other. And then I realized that was your daughter. Yeah. And I saw the way that you interacted with her, and with such an intellectual conversation, and the way she interacted with you and engaged with you. And then later on that same afternoon, I see you out jogging with her. Uh-huh. And the two of you were running together there at the hotel where we were staying. And I thought, that's the type of relationship I would love to have with my children.
Well, she's a better writer than I am. She's, and I don't deserve credit for her. I mean, Nini is her mother and has a equally intense and deep relationship with all our children's, probably a greater relationship actually than I did. I was traveling here and there around the world, but Louisa wrote a book called Age of Entanglement, which is anticipated a whole quantum entanglement and told the history of it, and was published by Knopf. It's a major book that resulted in her being invited to that meeting. I was an afterthought to this meeting of.
No, you weren't an afterthought, but that.
Well, she went to one of those meetings before I did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was the one who had the first relationship.
I see.
with this nonconformist
Yeah.
achievement society or whatever.
Right. So when they want to get nonconformists together, you're always, I think, at the top of the list. George, thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to Houston, and hopefully we'll make the rest of your day real fulfilling, and you'll be able to learn what you want about where flash Joule heating is going and the new technologies that are coming out. It is so much fun to be a scientist and to be discovering these new things because this whole thing of surprise is exciting, and you find new things that nobody has ever seen before. And you just say, Lord, thank you. Thank you for these discoveries. The Lord Jesus is so good. Glory to God.
Thank you so much, Jim. Inspirational as always.
Thank you for joining me today. If you could give us a like, share, or podcast review, we would appreciate it. If you have any questions, you could send them to ask@jesusandscience.org, and we'll try to answer some of those questions in an upcoming video. And if you do not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ and you want to hear about why I believe, send me an email to tour@drjamestour.org, and we'll get together by Zoom, and I'll share with you why I embrace the resurrection of Jesus Christ.